come up here, we can all just kind of gather together. Now you're free to take all the pictures you want to take, whether you use a flash or not, that's fine, doesn't really make any difference, okay? Okay, so here we are in what I think is the most famous building in Philadelphia. It's probably one of the more famous buildings in the entire country. So if I ask you where you are, you will tell me. Where are we? Building.
Independence Hall.
Independence Hall, she says. Okay. Sorry, technically, you're wrong. Okay? That term Independence Hall is what we might call a nickname in today's vernacular. Okay? So, how do we get this building and why do we call it Independence Hall? Well, way back in the 1700s, there were no such thing as states or provinces under the British rule. Philadelphia was the capital of the province, state, commonwealth, they all mean the same thing, of Pennsylvania. Philadelphia was the largest city in the colonies at the time, twice as large as New York and Boston. Yeah, about 30,000 people lived in the area. But being a major city, our legislators had no place to meet for their sessions, and so money is authorized to erect the building, begun in 1732, which just happens to be the same year that George Washington was born, and it took 22 years to complete. By the time it was done in 1754, which is the back room we call the Tower Room, it was one of the largest and most expensive buildings in the entire country. The actual title of this building is the State House of Pennsylvania. Makes sense, we're the capital, right? Now, which again leads to the next question. Why do we call it Independence Hall? Anybody? Nobody? Oh, thank you.
Here in this decoration.
There you go. This thinks all you are U.S. citizens, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. Okay. She says this is where they sign a declaration. Everybody agree?
Yes.
Anybody disagree?
No.
The answer is we don't know. Okay? It's kind of lost in history how the term got started. But we do know that there's a story, and some of it's factual, some of it's probably exaggerated, as most stories are. In 1824, the Marquis de Lafayette, George Washington's aide, came here for a visit, and he thought our revolution was the greatest thing that ever happened. So supposedly he asked his host that he wanted to see this Hall of Independence where all these important documents were signed. And again, supposedly they say, what do you mean? He said, I want to see the place not only where the Declaration was signed, but where the sign. What's the other major important document we have?
Constitution.
The Constitution was signed, okay? So supposedly that's where the term comes from. Now, the Park Service took over custody of these buildings in 1950. They're owned by the city, but the mission was to restore these rooms to what they looked like in the British era, not necessarily the American era. So the colors and the layout that you see here all reflect the British era. You're standing where the state Supreme Court met, or the lower courts could also meet here. Across the halls where the legislators sat in the assembly room, and the governor and other officials had office upstairs. Now, when you look at this particular courtroom, if you're familiar with our system, it does not look like an American courtroom, and it should, again, British era. However, we've taken most of our law from the British, and so the courtrooms are similar, and I'll show what's here and how it is different. On your right here is where the grand jury would sit. 24 men would be impaneled to give evidence. If they felt there was enough for a trial, they issued what was called a bill of indictment. And then a petite or trial jury of 12 men sat over here on your left. Here you have the witness box in front of them, and behind me the bench where the judges sat. Ladies, you would not have served on the jury at that time because you were less than first-class citizens. That's just the way it is, okay? Now, in the American system of today, if you watch our television shows where you're standing, you know there are two tables, prosecution, defense. But under the British, all the lawyers would sit at the one table, as you see behind me. So, one person we have left that we haven't discussed yet, and that person is on trial. What do we call the person on trial? The defendant, okay? Now, we know that in the American system, that person sits with their attorney. But, I'm sure it might be still in Australia, I'm not sure. Back in the British world, we were under the British, the defendant was required to stand in this device, and this is called the prisoner's dock. They still have that? Okay. And every day that person came to trial, he or she had to literally stand trial and face their accusers. Now, in the American system, we don't use the prisoner's dock anymore. Why? it simply fell out of style. And so by the mid-1830s, these pretty much had disappeared. Excuse me, there also may have been another reason. Think about it. You're a jury member, and I'm a defendant, and you're staring at me day after day after day. And even though there's a presumption of innocence, because I'm standing here very exposed, that maybe mentally, that idea that because I'm here, I must be guilty. So under our system, we feel it's more fair to sit with the attorney, so you're not quite as conspicuous as standing up here.